On this episode of TJ's Reef, I'm going to give you my top tips and considerations you should use when choosing your lights. And why am I wearing these glasses? Stay tuned. Hey there everyone, this is TJ from TJ's Reef. Thanks for joining me for another episode. Before we get into the whole debate about lighting and things you should think about when you're picking out your lights for your tank, a couple of things. First of all, shout out to Reef Automation. If you haven't checked out the Reef Automation YouTube channel, please go over to Derek's YouTube channel and check it out. He covers everything that has to do with the equipment that goes into automating all the tasks of your system. So check them out. We'll put a link down in the description below. Second, why am I wearing these glasses? Well, it actually has to do with lighting. And no, this isn't like my attempt at a bargain basement Iron Man Tony Stark thing. No? Anyway, now I'm wearing these glasses because these are orange lensed glasses that you can buy and use to look at your reef tank and get a better idea of the colors that your corals and everything look like that aren't washed out by the blues. So putting on an orange filter just like you would on your camera, on your eyes, really takes all the blue out and makes your corals look really vibrant and pop. So that's this week's little tip here, is get yourself some orange glasses or an orange filter for your phone and you can really see what these colors look like. On to lighting. Today we're going to talk about lighting. And I'm going to try to give you all the things you should do when you're considering which lights to buy and how you should spend your money, because lighting is probably one of the single most expensive things you're going to put into your tank. They can range from hundreds of dollars to thousands of dollars. So here we go, let's get right into it. Here are my tips when choosing your lighting for your reef tank. All right, everyone, let's get right into this topic. I think it's great that we're going to have a discussion on lighting, since it is one of the most hotly debated topics in reefing, and it's also one that you're going to spend potentially a lot of money. So let's get right into it. And my first tip is something that I think everyone should think about before they even start looking at lights, and that is, what are you going to keep in your tank? If you don't need really high lighting because you're going to keep a fish only tank, for example, then don't spend $1,000 on lights. You don't need to spend money on something that is not going to benefit your tank. Put it into something else that will help your tank inhabitants. Now, if you're going to have softies or anemones or LPS, yeah, you're going to need a good mid-range light. If you're going to keep SPS, and if you really want to have a SPS dominant tank where you need to bathe that tank in high par lighting, then you're going to need a really strong and full spectrum light. So first decide, what are you going to keep? All right, number 2 on my list, and again, these aren't in any particular order, except I think the last one should always be first. Next, what's your budget? Don't spend money you can't afford on lighting, or for any piece of equipment for that matter. So just determine what your budget is for your lighting needs. So that budget is generally going to be dictated by what you intend on keeping, and also what you can afford. So don't put yourself in the poorhouse for your lights. So stick with a budget. Don't break the bank. You know, I'm someone who, yeah, lighting's important and I'm definitely going to spend some money on it, but I'd rather put money into the inhabitants, the corals, the fish, and everything else that's going in the tank if it's not needed for lighting or any other equipment for that matter. So determine what your budget is. All right, next on the list, and this goes along with the budget, which is, don't just stick with the big names in lighting. Yeah, you know, you see all the big names out there with beautiful growth and everyone loves, all these big names, and I'm not going to mention any of them because I don't want to seem like I am sponsoring or promoting any of them, but lots of different lights can produce amazing results. And if people are telling you that you have to spend $1,000 on a light, that's not true. You can spend significantly less, even to keep high-end acros, on lighting and still get amazing results. I encourage you to search the forums, look at the web, and see what people are using, and you will find out that there are absolutely amazing tanks out there using lights that people refer to as black box lights. Many of them are made in China and whatnot, and they're kind of a no-name brand, not something typically associated with reefing, or you'll hear a lot in the reefing discussion. But then when you search for those lights and you check to see what kind of results people are having, you'd be shocked at how well some of these lights work. Now, having said that, there are definitely some lights out there that are crap, and there's no other way to put that. And so don't dismiss cheaper lighting or lower, name brand lights out there just because, you have to spend $800 or $1,000 on them. And kind of the converse of that is, just because you spend a ton of money on a light or get a really high-end light, that doesn't guarantee success either. Lighting is just one part of the overall picture of success in your reef tank. All right, moving right along on this list is PAR. You need to know what your PAR levels are. Well, at least I think you do. A lot of people will complain about, hey, my coral's turning colors, or it's not growing, or something's going on in the tank. And one of the first questions a lot of people will ask when trying to help people figure out what's wrong is, what's the PAR? What kind of PAR? What kind of lighting intensity is that coral getting? And most people don't know. They'll just say, oh, I have my lights at 75% and they're 12 inches off the tank. Well, that really doesn't tell us anything. It's a guessing game. It really is. And you can't use what other people's PAR numbers are, even in the exact same setup. Why? Because your wave makers are going to create different patterns in the water that's going to refract light differently. Your water may not be as clear. There's a lot of different factors that go into why your numbers will be different than someone else's using the same light in the same tank. So get yourself a PAR meter. A lot of people complain that PAR meters are expensive, and they can be. They can be extremely expensive. So here's two options. One, buy yourself a Senai, which is what I use as my PAR meter. For a couple $100, you've got your own PAR meter, and it works great for those couple of times that you need to know what your PAR is. The other option is to rent one from an online retailer. And the third option is check with your local reef clubs to see if they have one that you can borrow. Join a local club, and many of them allow their members to use a club-owned PAR meter for free. So you do have resources. Now, once you find out your PAR, I suggest you take a picture of your tank and you do a PAR map. And that's where you jot down the numbers at the spots on your tank that you've measured PAR. That way, when you buy a coral down the road, you know exactly where you can and can't place it, because you'll have a great map telling you what the lighting intensity is at any given spot in your tank. One final tip regarding PAR: don't use your eyes. The human eye is horrible at judging intensity. Think about it. If you look at your blue lights in your tank, you'd think it's very dim. If you have a very blue lit tank, it looks dim to the human eye. But once you throw that PAR meter in there and you find out you're getting 300 PAR at the mid-level, it's kind of shocking sometimes at how intense that lighting actually is. So this tip is measure your PAR, please. My next tip has to do with how are you going to mount your lights. There's a lot of things that are going to determine how your lights get mounted above your tank. And some of those things could be, are you going to have a canopy? Do you have a limited amount of room inside that canopy to get those lights a certain distance off the surface of your tank. If you're not using a canopy, do you have a hanging kit? Are you going to be able to hang it from the ceiling? Are you going to have to create some type of shelf or something above your tank to hang lights off of? Are you going to go with an on the tank bracket for your light, or does it come with mounting legs or something like that? Something that may look good with mounting doesn't always mean it's the best way to mount the light, so keep that in mind. Some mounting options don't give you the proper height that you need for mounting your light, and you maybe get too close to the surface of the water, which causes too narrow of a not a spectrum, but a layout, a spread of the lighting in the tank. So you might have to move it higher up, depending on your aquascape or the size or shape of your tank, really. So make sure you consider how you're going to mount your lights. All right, so next up on the list, things to consider when you're talking about lighting your reef tank are heat issues. Back in the day, my old 125, I had 3 giant metal halide lights above it in a canopy, and that created tremendous heat issues. Yeah, it was great for lighting, but I had to install a chiller on my tank, and so that's something you're going to have to consider. Are you using lights that are putting off a lot of heat? Now, most modern LED lights don't cause heat issues. Of course, if you get enough of them and they're close to the surface, you will definitely have to consider heating issues. So make sure you think about maybe fans or a chiller when you're thinking about your overall reef setup. If you're going with T5s or metal halides, kind of old school, you're definitely going to have heat issues unless you've got your lights mounted very high above your tank. Last up on the list, we're going to talk about control. Now, a lot of LEDs offer remotes or apps to control your lights. And if you're not using an app or a remote, you might be using an Apex or other controller to take care of your lighting schedule for you. Great. I love it. I love that you're able to do these things. I love that I can pick what percentages I want of each light and all the different colors, and I can check my spectrum and adjust for par and all that great stuff. But don't fall into the trap of having all these amazing features which you're going to shell out a lot of money for that you generally are only going to use once. Once you set your light up, you generally don't have to touch it again. Now, I say generally because maybe in the beginning of the setup of your tank, you realize maybe it's too bright, maybe it's not bright enough, maybe you got to do a shift in your color, spectrum, because your corals just aren't, reacting the way they should or what have you. So that's great. You might have little adjustments here or there, but generally speaking, once you've got your lights dialed in, you won't need those fancy apps or those fancy controllers anymore. Since I've hooked my lights up to the Apex, I have adjusted them once because I realized after about 3 or 4 months, I wasn't really happy with the color, and so I shifted it a little less blue, and again, I did another par map just to make sure, and now I probably won't touch it again unless something bad starts to happen in the tank. So don't get sucked into all these control features when you probably are only going to use them once and then forget it. Hey, I hope everyone enjoyed this episode of TJ's Reef. If you did, please thumbs up, maybe drop a comment down below, and subscribe. Hit the bell button. That way you'll find out every time I put a video out. Right now we're averaging about once a month, but I'm hoping that it might be every couple of weeks or even more as we move forward into the series. Another thing, make sure you get yourself some orange glasses, really see what your corals look like. It actually makes the fish pop too, so it's good for fish and corals. And lastly, after you smash that subscribe and like button here for TJ's Reef, please head over to Reef Automation's YouTube channel and do the same. I would really appreciate it, and everyone over at Reef Automation would appreciate it too. So until the next episode, be careful out there, wear your masks, get your vaccination, take care of your reef. Boom.